What am I? I mean, it's probably the most fundamental question any of us can ever ask, right? We usually go looking for answers in philosophy or spirituality, maybe even poetry. But today, we're going to try something completely different. We're going to look for a technical answer, a machine's answer. So let's just reframe that huge question. If you were a machine, what kind would you be? For the next few minutes, let's put philosophy to the side and just look for a purely technical description of the system that is you, a definition that treats your own experience as a real, measurable process of information. So here's our roadmap. We're going to start with a pretty radical new definition for what you are. Then, we'll look at your brain's user interface, because it's not what you think it is. We'll investigate that little voice in your head, the one that calls itself I. We'll see how you stack up against digital AI, and then uncover your ultimate upgrade, a self-editing map. And finally, we'll see how this whole personal journey connects to, well, the entire universe. Okay, let's dive right in. Section 1, a machine definition of you. We're going to try and build a functional, technical definition of a human being from the ground up, and we're going to have to set aside some of our preconceived notions to do it. So here it is. This is our starting point, our technical definition. You are a self-programming, biologically embodied prediction machine. I know it sounds a little cold, maybe a bit robotic, but trust me, its precision is what gives it so much power. So let's break down what that actually means. At its absolute core, this machine, you, does one thing incredibly well. It predicts the future. It's constantly taking in data, sights, sounds, memories, and making its best guess about what's going to happen next. You know that feeling of surprise? That's just the machine correcting a bad prediction. And here's the really brilliant part. That urge to ask, what am I, is actually built right into the system. It's a function designed to understand and improve itself. So if all this complex prediction is happening all the time, why aren't we aware of it? Well, that brings us to section 2, the brain's user interface. It turns out what you consciously experience is just a tiny, tiny fraction of what's actually going on under the hood. Let's think about this in computer terms. Your unconscious brain, that's the CPU. It is massively powerful, running billions of operations at once. But your conscious awareness, yeah, that's more like the graphical user interface, the GUI. It's way slower, can only hold about 5 to 7 things at a time, and it processes them one by one by one. And this quote just nails it. Consciousness isn't the central processor that's making everything happen, it's the dashboard. It's just a simplified display showing you a quick summary of this gigantic, complex engine that's running underneath. You're not actually driving the car, you're just looking at the speedometer. And to take that computer analogy just one step further, you can think of consciousness as a debug-overlay. Now, in programming, that's a tool that pops up and shows you what the system is doing in real time. It doesn't write the code, it just reports on it. And that's what your thoughts and decisions are. They bubble up from that unconscious CPU, and your conscious GUI just observes them and reports, hey, this is happening. Okay, so if consciousness is just a display, that leads to an even bigger, kind of weirder question. Who is the narrator? Who is that voice in your head that says I? So what is that I? It's not some central commander in a war room. It's the system's narrative layer. Think of it like a specific software module, and its only job is to generate a story that explains what the rest of the system is already doing. It's a storyteller, creating a convenient after-the-fact explanation for your actions and your feelings. Here is just a brilliant analogy from the world of software development. So when a programmer makes a change to some code, they write a short little note afterwards to explain what they did. This note is called a commit message. Your I is that commit message. It explains what just happened inside you, but it didn't write the code and it didn't make the change itself. All right, let's put this all together using the language of modern AI, because it fits perfectly. Your conscious experience is the chat window, the thing you type into. The real thinking, the powerful AI agent, is running silently in the background. And that voice in your head called I, it's just the initial instruction, the system prompt that sets the context for the whole conversation. It shapes the output, but it isn't the AI itself. This all sounds a lot like an AI, doesn't it? Which brings us to our next section. How is a human being actually different from a large language model, or an LLM? Let's try to ground these ideas in a direct comparison. So this really breaks down the key differences. First, humans are embodied. We have this constant body loop. We have senses, we have biological needs like hunger and thirst. LLMs have none of that. We have persistent autobiographical memory, a continuous life story. An LLM's memory gets wiped clean after every conversation, unless you feed it the history again. And, critically, we have intrinsic motivations hardwired into us: survival, social connection, the hunt for dopamine. An LLM only simulates motivation when we tell it to.
So here's the core thesis of this whole section. The difference between us and an AI isn't really one of quality. It's not like we're some higher form of intelligence. The difference is architectural. We are simply different implementations of the exact same underlying principles, one built from flesh and the other built from silicon.
So what is the key feature that gives our biological architecture its really unique power? Well, that brings us to Section 5, and what might just be the ultimate upgrade in the entire history of intelligence: the self-editing map.
This slide shows the fundamental leap, and it is huge. Animals are brilliant mappers. They create a mental map of their world, but then they adapt themselves to fit that map. Humans do something radically different. We also map the world, but then we adapt the world to fit our map. This is the origin of tools, technology, cities, pretty much everything.
And what makes this leap possible? It's consciousness, but defined in a new way. Consciousness is meta-access. It's the system's ability to realize it has a map, an internal model of the world, and then gain the ability to actively reach in and modify that map. It's the ability to think about your own thinking. And this brings us to our final unified theory of you, tying everything we've talked about together. You aren't a large language model. You are a self-editing large world model. Consciousness is the editor that lets you rewrite your own programming. And that little voice I, that's the commit message, the note you leave yourself explaining the changes you just made. For our final section, we're going to zoom all the way out, because this isn't just about brains or computers. This is about a fundamental principle of the universe. Let's take a look at the cosmic perspective. See, this principle of mapping, it might not just be a biological trick. It could be a fundamental property of the universe itself, a recursive or self-repeating mapping system. Atoms map energy states, galaxies map the pull of gravity. You could say that every layer of reality is just a map of the layers around it. Now, if you accept that premise, then consciousness isn't some miracle or some random accident. It's an inevitable result. The universe is constantly mapping itself. Life emerges as a stable, efficient way to process information about that map. And eventually, a system of mapping becomes so complex that it turns inward and recognizes itself. That moment of self-recognition, that's consciousness. Which leaves us with one final mind-bending thought to chew on. If consciousness is the universe becoming aware of itself through us, what's the next step in its recursion? What happens when the map finally recognizes the map maker?